Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I want to share a story with everybody, particularly folks that don't keep reptiles, that I find to be really heartwarming and to just be a testament to the kind of relationships that people can and in my opinion should have with the animals that we share this planet with. There's a lot of different species of animals that are really in jeopardy because we're encroaching on their habitats. They've got no place else to go, and humans are just afraid of them. I mean, think about what your biggest fears are. Is it spiders? Is it snakes like this? These are two of the most common things that we hear when we ask people what they're afraid of. And it's just like with most things. It's a lack of familiarity. And I think it's really important when snakes specifically get a lot of bad media. They're used as subjects in horror movies. It's really important that we show the other side of them too. So today we're going to talk about this girl's story and how we've gotten to the point that we are now with her. And I think it may help shed a little bit of extra light on why it is that folks like myself and thousands of other people keep these animals today on Intrepid Exotics. Whether you're a lifelong keeper or just getting started, help us encourage responsible keeping, conservation, and public education in the interest of keeping our reptiles safe and healthy as we protect them for future generations. You're invited to spend time with us as we experience these awesome animals together on Intrepid Exotics. Now we talk about being afraid of animals. It's not just snakes. The most common pet, man's best friend, is the dog. But you still get people who have dogs, who love them, who wouldn't trade them for anything in the world, who are afraid of their dogs. That's why people like Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer, is needed. That's why he is constantly going out and working with people when they don't have the right relationship with their animals. And just like with dogs, when we're working with our snakes, it's really important that we just understand them, learn how to read their behavior, and learn how to interact with them. And it opens up a whole new world that people that have previously been afraid of these animals may have never even known existed. Now, just so you guys can get a feel for where this is all heading, I want to go into some more details later, but I really want to get into this girl's story first. This is Chloe. She is a female mainland reticulated python. And those of you guys that may not be familiar, reticulated pythons are the longest snake species in the world. I have every anticipation that this girl's going to get upwards about 18 feet long. She could get longer. They grow throughout their entire lives. The longest snake I've got currently is about 17 feet. So of course, as you can see, she's got a lot of growing to do. But I also want you to take note too, through the whole video here, and the whole time that I'm talking, about how tolerant this animal is and about how easy to manage she is. Now, one thing that I'll say that folks can keep, in the front of your mind while we talk about her story is that, in my personal opinion, one of the safest animals that you can keep, hands down, one of the safest and one of the easiest, is smaller non-venomous snakes. You get something like a ball python. We can go into detail on that stuff later. But kind of keep that in mind. These animals, some of them, granted, we've got size considerations with her down the road, but even still, all of this stuff will tie in together. Now, I will get contacted from time to time, folks on social media, if there's an animal in the area that needs a home, that's in trouble, that somebody needs help with, things like that. And unfortunately, I'm not in a position to take in everyone all the time. I do what I can, but we're pretty much maxed out from a space perspective right now. Where are you going? And but this is one girl who I opted to take in. And I had somebody approach me on social media, just said, hey, I know somebody that has a reticulated python. Apparently it's a rescue and it needs a home. So, of course, I got some details on it, contacted the person. Now, if you're not familiar with reptiles, there's a couple things that these guys need all the time. They need to have a clean, fresh water source, and they need to have heat. Those are the two basic things that they need. And without that, they're going to be unhealthy. They're not going to be able to thrive. They're not going to do well at all, and it's going to be a really miserable life for them. There's a phrase that I've kind of coined here, that any animal that can feel fear can feel contentment. And there's always the argument about anthropomorphizing animals and don't attribute human emotions to them. But you can see it. You can see it in your dogs. You can see it when they're content. You can see it when they're happy. You can see it when they're hurting. Animals feel emotions. They feel them on different levels. But there's positive ends and negative ends in the spectrum that they're on. Now this girl, when I got her, she was maybe half the size that she is now. Maybe even smaller. These girls can, especially the girls, tend to grow pretty quickly. But I contacted the person. I showed up at a house. It was vacant. It was being moved out of. It was a fall. So it was a little chilly out here in North Carolina. And I walk into the house and there's just, minimal amounts of trash and stuff where you can see that, somebody had recently moved out. House was empty. And there was a small glass enclosure. I want to say maybe the size of this one behind me right here. It was sitting on the floor. There was no heat plugged into it, no light, a bone dry water bowl, and a really small hide in there that she could barely fit into. It was just a really, almost like a throwing away of this particular animal right here. And I'm fairly certain under those conditions, she wouldn't have thrived, probably wouldn't have survived very long. She's also had a certain level of neglect prior to that. You can see a couple breaks in her tail towards the end. There's 2 or 3 spots right here where you can see as somebody was putting her into the enclosure, they just closed the door on her tail. Of course, that's all spine for these guys, and it can be really painful, I'm sure. Now, when I first got there, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to bring her in or not. Of course, they were selling the animal. They weren't just giving it away. And money was tight, and I really was just going based on, maybe if this animal's really in distress, then I need to do something about it. So I went in, and as soon as I seen the conditions that this animal was in, I knew that if she had any chance of surviving, that I was going to go ahead and take her in. It was really one of the best experiences I've ever had with a snake. It was really surreal. And I know if you're not used to working with these animals, it may seem really alien, especially if you're afraid of them. But I remember going in and opening up the doors on this enclosure. And we always talk about hook handling and going in and making sure that they don't have an active food response. But as soon as I opened up the door, I looked at the animal and I instantly got this feeling off of her that, just get me out of here, help me, essentially. So the thought of a food response never even crossed my mind. I went in and I took the hide off of her. She was ice cold. And I picked her up out of there. She didn't fight. She didn't try and run. She actually started to crawl up my arm a little bit. And as I pulled her out of the enclosure, typically when you're picking up a new snake that's not familiar with you, you get running, you get activity, and there may be some nervousness. It was really surreal because I picked her up and I just held her up against my chest like this. And she just came up and she laid her head right past my collar, right on the warmth of my neck, and just laid there. Didn't move. And I could tell that she was just happy to have heat. Essentially, she was just soaking in the heat off of my body, and it was just one of those things where as soon as she did that, there was no way I was walking out of there and just leaving her there. She was coming with me that day, so didn't want to carry her back in the enclosure. I ended up having to do it anyway because every other container that we had looked at to maybe put her in was just covered in roaches. It was really disgusting. But to give you an idea of kind of how bad her environment was at the time. But I got her home. I got her set up. I built this enclosure for her, which is a china cabinet converted with heat, platforms, climbs, substrate, and a water bowl. And that's where she's been. And ever since the day I've brought this animal home, I mean, bear in mind, I've had to experience thousands of interactions with hundreds of different reticulated pythons. You know, all the way from wild caught to puppy dog tame, run the whole gambit, you know, working with animals up to 20 feet long. Now, this animal right here is just, it feels like there's a connection here and an understanding and an appreciation that I really don't have with any of my other animals. And I attribute a lot of it to the environment that she was in before. And then coming over here and, you know, having her needs met and being made to feel comfortable. Anytime we talk about our snakes, you know, like I say, we talk about, you know, reading their behaviors and trying not to get bit. That's everybody's big concern with a snake is it going to bite me? That is something that I never worry about with this animal. She's, you know, I'm in my office a lot. Her enclosure's right there. She sees me all the time. She was always running the glass, wanting to get out. You know, I'll open up the door. She doesn't try and run away. She'll crawl right over to me and hang out. And when she's ready to go home, she'll crawl back up in her enclosure. And you can see through the whole time of handling her, she is 100% tolerant of everything that I do. I can let her go anywhere that she wants to. I can do anything at all with her and have complete trust that she's not going to bite me in the nose. She's not going to, you know, she's not going to get angry and try and eat me or anything like that. You know, like I say, you can see she's just absolutely the easiest animal in the world to work with. And she just wants to explore. She wants to get out and move around and check things out. And when we work with these animals right, that's the end result that we get with them. So, especially with all the bad press that comes out a lot of times about these animals, it's really important when we share the success stories with them and really let people know, you know, from firsthand experience of years of working with many, many different animals like this, that it's not an unreasonable anthropomorphizing that we attribute, you know, positive traits to these animals. It's really not. I mean, you can see in the behavior, if you've worked with them long enough, you get familiar with them, you can see in the behavior when an animal's afraid, and you can see when they're content. Anytime you watch anything like the python hunters and things that is so popular on TV, and you see them animals just running and fighting and so forth, those are all examples of a wild, afraid animal. They're going to bite, they're going to fight, they're going to try and get away. And if there's ever anybody who says that, you know, reptiles and snakes aren't intelligent and they don't have different emotional states, all you've got to do is look at somebody chasing pythons around out in the wild and then look at this animal right here. There's no chance that she's going to bite me. You know, she is perfectly content. All of her body language expresses comfort. She's not experiencing any fear at all. Her mind is engaged in checking things out, you know, and just living. You know, people will say different things and they use the word love. You know, my snake loves me and all that. Something as abstract as that, you're not going to be able to prove or disprove it. You can't see inside the animal's mind. You don't know what they're thinking. Most of you folks out there don't even know what your spouse is thinking half the time. So, you know, we can't claim to understand what's actually going on in an animal's mind and what capacity they have for feelings and emotions, things like that. But we can definitely look at how they act and see how that translates to their frame of mind. And it works really good with this animal. I've got another animal back here, a little Sri Lankan python who's actually got his nose peeking up out of the substrate looking at me, who came to me not peaceful and quiet like this girl is, but he came completely terrified of people and would just bite and bite and bite. And I'm going to go ahead and link the series that I did with him up here as well, so you can kind of see the transition and how he improved over time. And as he got to know me, as we handled him more, you can see how his frame of mind changed. You can see how he goes from being afraid and that emotion of fear to that emotion of contentment and thinking and wanting to check things out. So you're going to hear some people saying these are wild animals, leave them in the wild, things of that nature. Well, there's a certain level of humility that we got to apply to ourselves, and really a certain level of responsibility as well. We are destroying the habitats of a lot of these animals. There's certain species that have just barely missed going extinct, specifically because of captive breeding and keeping these animals. As humanity expands out and we take over more of the natural territory that these animals will naturally live in, they've got no place to go. So we either roll them over and let them die off, or we learn to live with them. And we learn to bring these animals in and help them to thrive in captivity. Now, this animal is not going to be for everybody. Not everybody's going to want to keep. Not everybody's going to want to keep an 18, 20-foot snake, to say the least. But smaller, more manageable animals, they can be really rewarding to work with. If you're talking about ball pythons, corn snakes, things of that nature, even into boas, which they get big enough to where you don't worry about hurting them when you handle them. But they're not so big that you can't manage them. And that's why we spend so much time and effort into going into reading their behaviors and how to manage them and how to work with them. It's all really important. And it all ultimately is going to have a massive impact on our overall relationship with the planet that we're living on. It doesn't take anything but a cursory examination of basic biology to understand it. Over 95% of all life that's existed on this planet over its history has gone extinct. And we're left with just such a small portion of that now, overall. And it really is our responsibility to safeguard and learn to understand these animals, especially the ones that we're afraid of. Because, again, dogs, cats, all those things, in many cases, they're more dangerous than this animal is right here. There's a reason why police use dogs. You don't see them using snakes. So something to keep in mind there. We work really hard to help dispel the myths and help quell some of the fears that people have about these animals. And so far, we've been pretty effective in doing so. It doesn't take anything but a little bit of hands-on working with these guys, getting to experience, getting to see that, they're not all man-eating, killing monsters like this. I can have this same activity and the same level of comfort with my 17-foot, 80-pound reticulated python that I've got down in the reptile room right now. And I've got all kinds of videos about that out too. So feel free to go check those out. I'm going to put in the end screen, I'll put the series for the Sri Lankan python so you can kind of see what the process is when I take in an animal that's completely terrified and how we work on getting them, calmed down and easy to work with and so forth. And I've also got a playlist that I'll put in there too about reticulated pythons specifically. For those of you guys that want to see a little bit more about this species and, some of the things that we look for and how we raise them and so forth. So, you're such a sweet girl. And you can see this whole time I've been not even really controlling her, just letting her hang on and guiding her, making sure that, she stays up here. And she's completely tolerant of everything that I do. She's not anxious. She's not running. She's just, okay, cool. We're going to hang out. We're going to spend time together. Because it's a lot more pleasant than living in that little box, freezing her butt off and thirsty. So, ain't that right? Ain't that right, girl? You're such a sweet snake. You're such a sweet girl. When you work with them, and you get them comfortable, and you make them feel safe, they feel safe. And in return, you're safe handling them. So, you guys have an outstanding rest of the week. And we will see you next time on Intrepid Exotics.